Welcome to Orchestrate All the Things. I'm George Anatiotis and we'll be connecting the dots together. Stories about technology, data, AI, and media and how they flow into each other, shaping our lives.
Would you leave a Google staff engineer role just because you want your TV to automatically pause when you get up to get a cup of coffee? Actually, how is that even relevant, you might ask? Let's see what Pete Warden, former Google staff research engineer and now CEO and founder of Useful Sensors, has to say about that. Although naturally, much of what he did was based off of things others were already working on, Warden is sometimes credited as having kickstarted the TinyML subdomain of machine learning. Either way, TinyML is getting big, and Warden is a big part of it. Useful Sensors is Warden's latest venture. They just launched a product called AI in a Box, which they dub an offline, private, open source large language model for conversations and more. Even though it's not the first product Useful Sensors has created, it's the first one that's officially launched. That was a good opportunity to catch up with Warden and talk about what they're working on.
I hope you will enjoy the podcast. If you like my work, you can follow Link Data Orchestration on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Yeah, I'm Pete Warden. I'm currently CEO of Useful Sensors. I was on TensorFlow when we last spoke at Google. I was at Google for 7 years working on TinyML and generally running machine learning on devices outside of the cloud.
All right, cool. So obviously you're not doing that anymore, and you have a new, well, shall we call it venture, which you just mentioned, so Useful Sensors. And so what was the motivation? So what drove you to leave this otherwise, I guess, for many people enviable position you had at Google and just start this new thing?
So there were a couple of reasons. One of them was, as you know, I was working on TensorFlow, an open source machine learning library from Google. And specifically, I'd been focused on TensorFlow Lite Micro, which is aimed at running machine learning on embedded devices. And I was working on that because I really wanted to see everyday objects in our world. You know, I want to be able to look at a lamp and say on and have the lamp come on. Or I wanted my TV to automatically pause when I got up to get a cup of tea without me having to find the remote every time. And when I went to talk to companies that made light switches or TVs, and I'd tell them all about this wonderful open source code that they could get for free, and all the conferences and documentation and examples and books. They would, hear me out. And then at the end of it, they'd usually say something like, that's great, but we barely have a software engineering team. We definitely do not have a machine learning team. So can you just give us something that gives us a voice interface or tells us when somebody sits down in front of the TV? And so that was really the starting point for Useful Sensors was, okay, can we actually build something or some things that just provide these machine learning capabilities to all of these consumer electronics and appliance and other companies who could benefit from it, but without them having to worry about the fact there's machine learning happening under the hood.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I mean that's a valid motivation, but I have to say I also had the chance, just doing a little bit of basic research, let's say before the conversation, to hear yourself speak in a video that's actually recorded and available on the Useful Sensors website. in which you also cite something else. So you share an anecdote there when you were talking to some person, you know, when he mentioned, he or she, I don't know, actually mentioned what I usually refer to as the Google creepiness factor. So, and
Yes.
it's something that actually keeps coming back for, not specifically for Google, I have to say that, but Google is one of the perpetrators, let's say, of this. So, you know, the usual thing, like, okay, I had this conversation about, I don't know, XYZ, and I had my mobile on, and then the next day, or, you know, for the next week or month or number of months, actually, I get bombarded with ads about this XYZ thing that I was talking about. And this person asks you, like many other people ask, so how is that possible? That obviously must mean that, you know, they're actually tapping to my conversation. And well, I had the impression that that was also a deciding factor, let's say, that sort of motivated you to do that, because the thing that you just mentioned, so being able to offer like very, very simple interface that people will be able to use, I'm pretty sure you could have just as well done that wearing your Google hat as well.
Well, that's definitely true. That was my second motivation, was really trying to, you know, as you say, tackle the creepiness head on. And what I was able to say about that common perception that, you know, big tech companies are spying on our conversations, at least I know for Google, when I was there, I worked on that code. We weren't, but I couldn't prove it because everything is internal inside Google. So the second big motivation was to build systems that were simple enough that they could actually be verified and checked by a third party, somebody that, you know, consumers can trust. You know, I would love to get the EU data regulators involved in this. I would love to get, in the US, people like Consumer Reports or the FTC actually, you know, trying to check this, have nutrition labels, so that there's actually, you know, you can tell what data a device is going to be sharing.
Okay, so we'll get to that part, because obviously, at least in part, that seems to imply open source, so that software that people and third-party auditors in general are able to inspect and then review. But before we get to that part, I'd like to ask you, so, all right, so I estimate that usual sensors must be about a year or a year and a half old by now, more or less.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are you right now? So what's your current plan, and where are you in the what's your status in the execution of this plan? Do you already have products? Do you have some people on board? What are you working towards?
Yeah, so that might actually be a good time to sort of show you this demo of text to speech, and hopefully you can see that it's actually providing live captions of
Yes.
this conversation.
Yeah.
So this is our latest product that we're going to be launching on September 19th through crowdsupply.com. So prior to this, we've also we've launched the person sensor, which is a small board, which you can kind of see here, that provides a indication of whether there's a person nearby, running entirely locally on a at the moment we're retailing this for $10, and we've also launched a tiny QR code reader that you can get for $7. So we've actually been launching products to sort of back up our vision of running machine learning locally, and really being able to do it in an in a private and a checkable way.
Okay, so well, based on what I've just seen, then it would seem that well, what you actually mean by products is actually chips, because well, that's what you just showed me. So I guess in that sense, well, let's just frame it another way. So who is your audience? Is it going to be people who buy those chips and then have the skills, the capacity, and also the infrastructure, like the boards and the ability to connect those chips to those boards? And actually, I guess you're also going to be needing sensors to make those products actually viable. So, for example, if you're going to be able to detect a person's presence, I don't know, you need a camera or I don't know, something else that you're able to leverage in order to make that happen. So it sounds to me like they're actually more geared towards people who have the ability, the skill set, and the rest of the equipment to sort of integrate them into something bigger. And so not products in the, I don't know, more traditional sense, like self-contained.
Yeah, and that's a good question. So the these modules, the person sensor and the tiny QR code reader, they are self-contained, so they contain a small camera, as well as the all of the preloaded software needed to make it so that all you have to worry about with this is you plug it in, and then you get, for example, one pin that goes high whenever there's a person around. So we're trying to take all of the capabilities of machine learning, but wrap them up in a package that's no different than a temperature sensor or a pressure sensor, and provide very, very simple interfaces. Now, you're correct that these are very much aimed at both makers and at the larger scale, consumer electronics companies, appliance companies. We've worked with people who make audio equipment, TVs, coffee machines, vacuum cleaners. But the new AI in a box, which we're launching, which I showed you doing the captions, that's actually it is aimed at makers. It's something that you can go in, you can sort of change the code and things like that, but it does a bunch of useful stuff just kind of out of the box as well. So it gives you live captions, as you've seen. It lets you talk to a large language model that's actually running locally as well. And we're going to be implementing live translation as well. So that is still something that is maker friendly, but also has some immediate use cases out of the box.
Okay, so wearing my, I don't know, startup consultant hat, then I would probably say something like, well, it sounds like your primary audience then in terms of what's the biggest market that you can reach would actually not be end users, so consumers, but rather electronics makers and companies that can actually that may actually have the need to consume what you package as products en masse, and then use it for their own purposes and resell it as part of something bigger.
Yes, I mean that's really where we're a venture-backed business, and to justify that investment, we need to grow, and we need to have volumes of units that we can sell. And honestly as well, like I said at the start, I really want to see these capabilities in everyday objects, and so it's a really great opportunity to try and engage with some of these large manufacturers and see if we can actually improve these everyday objects.
Indeed, and I was actually going to ask you about your venture capital backing anyway, so I will return to that point in a bit. But before we do, there's something else that sort of popped up while listening to your line of thought about your potential audiences. So in my mind, well, there's a few of those, let's say, big potential big customers that you aspire to reach out to that could actually also have the impact of reaching out to end users, to consumers. So, well, mobile device makers come to mind, or companies that in whatever other way make end products that are meant to be sold to consumers. So do you have access to any of those? And I understand that you may not be at liberty to disclose things that you have not entirely sealed off yet, but so you don't have to mention names, but just broadly speaking, are you in conversations with any of those types of companies?
We actually have evaluation agreements with several large consumer electronics companies, for example, to check out, the first stage of trying to get these into their products. And I am hoping, we're just launching this speech to text, work. It's only just been launched or being launched, but I would love to see if we could actually get it into mobile phones, for example, because Google has done a great job with the Pixel phone, where if you actually use it, you'll find that you can get automatic captions running on device for any video or any other content that you actually play on the phone. But that's not widely available in the sort of Android ecosystem. So one of the applications I'd love to see is, make everyone's Android phone able to have that capability too.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, not a great amount of people are Pixel owners, and so if you somehow manage to get that kind of capability in just every other phone out there, I'm pretty sure that people will make use of that. And it's also going to be easier to reach a greater number of people that way, rather than starting to sell something which is standalone, like, oh, buy this device X so you can have this thing. It's much easier because everybody already does have a mobile phone, so it's much easier to reach people that way.
Yeah, that's very true.
Mm-hmm. So I guess that in order to make that happen, well, obviously the fact that you are a well-known figure in the community, and you have been with Google and you have this body of work behind you, obviously helps in opening doors. But I'm guessing that, well, you can't do everything yourself, and opening the door is not enough. You have to be persistent, and you have to reach the right people, and these things can take lots of time and energy and all of that. So obviously, you're not alone doing that. So what kind of team do you have working with you at Useful Sensors?
Well, I'm very lucky to have my co-founder, Manjanath, who was also one of the founders of TensorFlow. He also helped found the CUDA compiler team at NVIDIA, and he worked at Cerebras, the large chip company, for several years, starting their compiler team. So he's been an amazing producer of technological miracles, I'll say. He's really helped us, for example, run these modern transformer models much faster than other people have managed on especially this particular device we're using for the caption box. And then I have a fantastic team of people that either me or Manjanath have worked with in the past, from places like Google and Cerebras. So there's just 8 of us. So we're, still a pretty small team, but I've been really blown away by how much they've been able to accomplish.
Okay, so that's a good segue to return to that venture funding topic. So even for a team of 8, and even if these people are very much self-motivated and able to work independently and all that, well, they still have to pay bills at the end of the day. So
Yes.
and I also guess that you don't have much sales at this point, because, well, you're an early stage startup, which
Yeah.
sort of directly implies that you must have some sort of funding. Well, maybe you were able to bootstrap initially, but, well, that can only take you so far. So obviously those you must have venture capital backing, and I was wondering if you're able to disclose who are your backers, and, well, have you had like a seed round or pre-seed or any of those?
Yeah, we had a seed round back in May last year, where we raised $5 million roughly. And our lead investor was Mike Dauber at Amplify Ventures. And we've also had investment alongside that from James Cham at Bloomberg Ventures, Ava Ho at Fika Ventures, and Anthony Goldblum, who you might know from Kaggle, actually led from AIX Ventures, a pretty new firm from him and Chris Manning and Richard Socher. So most of those people I've known for over a decade, so it's actually been really great to work with them.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, I don't know all of the names that you mentioned, but some I do know, and judging from them, I'm able to tell that, well, it sounds like a sort of insider round, if you will. So people who are actually able to understand the kind of work that you do, and therefore were motivated to be early investors in that. So, and I'm guessing from the sound of it all that you'll probably reach a point where you will actually raise a Series A. And if you had like a 5 million seed round, then, well, I don't imagine you can have anything less than 10 for your seed.
Yeah, for the Series A, that's probably going to be about right. We're still figuring out the timing of that. But it's been really good. Seeing the reaction that we've had to the AI in a box, that has been, I think that's going to be a flagship product for us as we, sort of go into the next fundraising round.
Well, definitely in terms of awareness, because that's probably the one thing among your products that has the potential to reach more people directly. Indirectly, I still maintain that the rest of your products are eventually probably going to be used by more people, but
yes,
on the things that you can directly send to end users, probably AI in the box is it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Mm-hmm. Which brings me to, well, something completely different. And, well, I'm going to actually ask you to kick out freely on this one if you want to, because we didn't do that so far. So even from the start, when you mentioned this AI in a box and how you are able to somehow pack a large language model in a presumably not so powerful chip, I was going to, I got curious, so I wanted to ask you if, again, you're able to share which model exactly it is that you're using. I'm guessing that probably it's something open source with permissive license that actually enables you to do this sort of application. And I also wonder if you have tweaked it in any way, whether by using something like LoRa, which many people use these days, or I don't know, some kind of custom training or fine tuning or whatnot?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, like most of the a lot of what we focused on is the speech to text, trying to get that real time. And running large language models locally, there's a very active community of people doing that. So we actually had, once we were able to get the real-time speech to text working, we actually had a lot of choices around which models, which large language models we could actually run locally. And I'm actually not certain exactly which variation we are using in the current one, because we've gone through, I think, things like Vicuna, Orca, a lot of stuff based on like Llama 2. And we have been looking at doing some of our own fine tuning. We've been able to get a long way with just providing kind of prompt contexts for the interactions. So that has been, very interesting, sort of asking the large language model to be a bit of a comedian, or to, try and give short answers, or, these other ways that you can actually steer it. So yeah, we're, anybody who's familiar with sort of the large language model work, they would sort of look at what we're doing and be like, okay, yeah, that's using kind of known, known models, and it kind of makes sense. And what's really new is that you're actually able to talk to it in natural language and actually have it talk back.
Okay, so this is the part, the text to speech is the part that's, well, not really proprietary, because I was under the impression that at least some part of your work was proprietary, but I'm not so sure anymore, actually.
Yes.
So, well, something that you built in-house, let's say.
Yes, exactly. And I think I shared a link on email earlier to
Yes.
the Useful Transformers library, which is a way of taking advantage of the neural processing unit that's actually available on these rock chip SoCs that we're using. They're mostly ARM Cortex-A, sort of, they'd be familiar to anybody who's used like a phone SoC, except that they have this accelerator for neural networks on it. And we've actually been able to take advantage of that to run our speech to text several times faster than would otherwise be possible.
Yeah, well, thank you. I was actually also going to get to that part, because we did cover a little bit of the software side of things, but I was wondering what sort of hardware you use as well.
Yeah, so it's if you are familiar with like the Orange Pi boards, they're alternatives to Raspberry Pi. They tend to be a little bit more expensive, but also have more processing power. And we're using the same chipset that's used on those boards. And yeah, so it looks very much like a Raspberry Pi or a phone SoC. The biggest difference is that we picked this one because it does have this neural network accelerator on it.
Yeah, makes sense. And well, since we sort of touched upon the open source / community issue, indeed you did share that link to your GitHub, which I didn't see recently, but that sort of triggered me to look around again, and I have a very good explanation for why I miss it, because it's nowhere in your site. So I wonder.
Yeah, no, I mean that's true. We partly because we have not launched the the AI in a box yet. So you may notice we don't have that up on the site yet either, because that's going to be launching on September 19th. So that's where we normally put the links to the open source repos, is in like the product description. So that's why it doesn't show up on the website yet, is we're talking about this sort of pre-release, but you can find it if you go to github.com/useful sensors. You'll be able to see everything that we've open sourced there.
So presumably at this point in time, the only contributors are going to be, well, you and your team, basically.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if sort of community building, let's say, and evangelizing and so on is actually part of your plan as well. And if yes, how do you intend to go about it? Or, well, maybe you're just going to say, oh, we're just going to release the product, and then we'll just sit back and wait and let people come to us. But I don't know.
Well, I think one thing to do is look at our projects on Hackster that we've both done ourselves in terms of sample code for things like the person sensor and the tiny code reader, but also the community of people who've built their own projects using these, using our examples as a starting point, but actually, building their own systems on top of this stuff. So it's not so much that we're expecting a lot of engagement with the open source repos that we've made available. Like, that's sort of almost like the foundation layer. What we want people to be able to do is, for example, take the speech to text that we do through our AI in a box, and one of the things you can do is use it like a USB keyboard, so it just sends the text that it's hearing to the to whatever device it's plugged into, as if it were a somebody typing at a keyboard. So that means that it's actually quite a nice way to integrate with something like a Raspberry Pi, where the Pi can actually then control a robot or a sculpture or something like that, using voice, speech to text, speech recognition. So we're hoping that these things we're doing will be useful building blocks for people to build their own projects around. And that's where we've been seeing a lot of community engagement already with our existing products, and where we're hoping to see more.
Yeah, well, I would add to what you just said that, well, I can also picture this kind of scenario, but I think an important building block to make that happen is actually what you also already have. So having this large language model somewhere in the middle, because that can be your interface to whatever sort of API or programming language your device in the backend can communicate through. So you can say something in natural language, like, I don't know, turn on the light or whatever, and well, obviously you get the text, the speech text part will get you the textual command. You can, and then you can pass that to the large language model, which may be able to translate that to an API call, and which can actually operate on the physical switch and do what you wish it to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big reason why we've included the large language model, is it's fun to chat to and ask it to tell you jokes, and you can ask questions, and sometimes it will make stuff up, but a lot of the time it will it will tell you tell you something factual. But it gets really interesting once you start having specialized large language models that can respond to instructions, or have other actions that it can kind of pull out from the soup of natural language that we use when we're having conversations with each other.
Yeah, indeed. So overall, it sounds like your positioning, let's say, would be that of an ecosystem creator. So maybe you have sort of tapped with a couple of demo applications, or maybe even not so demo, like actual applications. But it sounds like you're positioning useful sensors as an intermediary, as someone who provides the infrastructure that other people and other companies will be able to use to create applications and products. So well, first of all, I wonder if my understanding is indeed what you're thinking of, and then if it is, what are some favorite current applications of yours, and what are some applications that you would like people to come up with?
Yeah, and I think that's a good way of describing our positioning. Is we want to enable other people to take advantage of all of these ML capabilities without having to kind of go down the rabbit hole of learning a whole new domain. And there are one of my favorite uses of this, of what we've already done, the person sensors, is actually by Thomas Burns. He created a robot called Alexatron, and its eyes are actually controlled using a person sensor to kind of track your face. So it's just a little detail, but it's always, kind of making eye contact with you, which is really kind of fun. We've also seen some interesting stuff around, on the commercial side. Blues Wireless have actually been doing some great work around, hey, is there a person here or not, for remote sensing. So just being able to tell, for safety reasons, is somebody in an area where, there could be, danger. And, we've had people just using, we actually had one person out in New York who's been looking at using the person sensor. He's an actor, and he has to pay somebody to train a spotlight on him when he's doing solo performances. So using the person sensor, he's actually able to, or he's trying to sort of use that to automatically control the spotlight, which, is not something I would have ever thought of, but it's the sort of thing that is really exciting once this stuff gets out into the world.
Yeah, well, that's also a good trigger for me to ask you another sort of closing question, let's say. Well, it's a good example of, well, what happens when you get like new technological capabilities and innovation. I mean, yes, on the one hand, it's sort of cool that this person is able to do that. On the other hand, somebody might say, well, and what about the person who used to got paid to shine that spotlight on him when he was performing? So what's your take on that? I mean, obviously it can go either way. And it's a much broader question than the specifics of what you do, but still, I wonder what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think, the whole question of, hey, is AI going to, get rid of jobs? From my perspective, I do see, some jobs may go away. It's hard to deny that, even when we're looking at things like driverless cars, that's likely to have a big impact there. But I tend to be fairly optimistic that this opens up the door to actually people being able to take take other jobs, and I'm really trying to be quite thoughtful about the stuff we're doing to see if we can actually make people's jobs easier versus trying to completely replace them. But yeah, you're right. That's a really big question with anything around innovation. If we're kind of quote unquote making things more efficient, what are the societal impacts of that?
Yeah.
And
yeah, obviously it's not something, well, either you or myself or anyone on their own can tackle, but well, it's always something to keep in mind, at least.
Yeah, and a big part of what I'm trying to do is actually get these technologies into people's hands so that it's not just a bunch of engineers who are making these decisions about what we should do, but people can actually try these models for themselves and see, for example, how useful but also flawed like the current generation of large language models are. They'll happily, if you ask them about somebody that it doesn't know about, it'll happily tell you, oh yeah, that person's a criminal. And so it takes a little of the, well, it gives people a much, I'm hoping, I don't want us, technocrats to be the ones making these decisions. I want a well-informed public who are actually able to say, hey, this is what we want.
Yeah, well, that's an opener for another, like, I don't know, 45-minute conversation on its own. So let's leave it at that for the time being. And well, thanks for thanks for dropping in, really, and for letting me and anyone who may be listening know about what you're up to. It sounds really interesting, and well, good luck with everything.
No, thank you so much, George.
Thanks for sticking around. For more stories like this, check the link in bio and follow Link Data Orchestration.